That time Rimuru got a daughter. By Asora09. The battlefield of the strongest. Third-person perspective. The Queen of Nightmares was distressed. Her most loyal retainer, Lewis, was yet to come back to her side with the piece she needed to checkmate the monster known as Rimuru. Even though that slime was strong, he was just a single individual. While it was generally true that in this world quality wins over quantity, that situation may change when said quality individual has his hands full dealing with several threatening situations simultaneously. Eventually, something will slip past him, or so is the thought of the hopeful, of those who believe they have an opportunity against such a monster. Luminous was no different either. She was strong, and because of her strength, she was able to comprehend just how overwhelming Rimuru was. It was personally an enemy she wouldn't want to clash head-on with. But then, why is she doing just that? Because strength normally comes in two set packages along with a most destructive element, arrogance. Arrogance is a double-edged sword. Arrogance can give you confidence, and confidence can give you the small push you need in order to attempt something. Confidence born by arrogance is not wrong in and of itself. The thing is, confidence born from arrogance is very propense to develop into tunnel vision. No, that is true for all types of confidence, regardless of its origin. You start to question if there is something or someone you cannot overcome with your own hand. And when you find something or somebody better than you, your confidence gets shaken, but only for a mere second, for after said second, it bounces back up as a ball to an even higher position, striving for simply one thing, to break whatever or whoever made it bounce in the first place. It is simply how such an aspect of nature works. Unfortunately for those who depend on their arrogance, said rebound is not unlimited. Everything that goes up must come back down, after all. You may push forward with your arrogance, but you will eventually reach a point in which you will prompt your own downfall. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. Rimuru's perspective. I just finished confirming the results of the battle in the imaginary space, and I have to say that was certainly AWE inspiring. I never doubted CL's victory, but I never expected she would utterly reduce Lewis to nothing so ruthlessly. I broke into a cold sweat in the middle of the battle, making a mental note not to anger Seal carelessly. Why yeah, she's scary, that Seal. Rimuru-sama. Are you alright? Benimaru looked worriedly at me as I unconsciously shivered at the thought of Ciel's wrath. Eats nothing. I wiped the cold sweat off my temple and looked ahead, where a dust cloud was rising high into the sky. That's right, now is not the time to be thinking about Ciel. It is only a matter of minutes before the Orc Lord and his army reach our location. Currently, only those who came with me from the village are present. Sue was left behind in the Lizardmen fortress to counter any insurrection that may spark throughout the battle. This time around, the combat against the Orc Lord should be considerably tougher than the first time, if everything is as I think it is. Against the Orc army it should be the same, though, or even easier, considering we have Shizusen and Foltia on our side. Mine lord, how shouldest we distribute our forces? Speaking of which, Foltia called out to me as she peeked out of Shizusen's body. A vein throbbed in my forehead for a second after listening to her speech, but I managed to keep it under control. I'll take care of the Orc Lord, you guys should just play with the rest of the orcs. I understand, mine lord. Though I would have preferred mine lord to allow us to take care of everything. Foltia seemed down, perhaps because she thought I didn't trust them enough. In the case of Benimaru and others, the Orc Lord will be too much for them, they would drop like flies. Benimaru and the ogres seemed surprised at my declaration. They clench their fists in a bit of frustration, but they don't reply to anything. Among you guys, the only person who could be able to defeat it would be Foltia. Then, mine lord. But it still isn't time to reveal to the demon lords that we have a prime spirit on our fold. If we manage to keep it hidden, we might figure a way to use it to our advantage in the future. By revealing my strength, I should be able to focus the public's attention to myself, and blind them into thinking I am the one who should be taken down no matter what, and that everyone else around me came second. That is what happened with Seal just a bit ago, when Luminous thought she had the advantage because I had temporarily left the village. Taking that into consideration, Foltia, please don't act too openly and only support Shizusen whenever she is in a big pinch. I understand, mine lord. I thought Foltia would be more depressed, but she was unexpectedly happy. Perhaps she feels excited to be treated as our secret weapon. Is she actually a bit childish? "They're here," Benimaru said as he placed his hand on his sword's handle and grinned. Likewise, Xian and the others all began to enter a battle stance. "Remember, there is a limit in the amount of orcs you can kill. And please don't forget to not kill that orc I told you." Before the battle, I had told them to limit the amount of orc deaths, as they would be a useful workforce to build Tempest. Of course, I also talked to them about a certain orc that would also become one of our best assets in the future. "Yes, Rimuru-sama." They all nodded with excitement. "Then, let's go. The time has come." Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. Third person's perspective. The orc lord slowly advanced as he watched his army ahead. Suddenly, several domes of black fire appeared, swallowing chunks of his army in mere seconds. That said, his mind was not focused on such trivial matters. "I am hungry." He just thought of a way in which to satisfy his bottomless appetite. Every day since the appearance of that man, he had been a victim of an insatiable hunger that had spread like fire among his people. And so he continued to move, searching for an end to his desire while losing sight of himself bit by bit. "This is enough." In front of him, an individual appeared. Their hair was a silverish blue, and they possessed very refined and androgynous facial features. Rimuru stood imposingly in front of the orc lord, not showing a glimpse of nervousness. How insolent. At the sight of the orc lord, one of the orc generals moved forward and charged at Rimuru. These type of orcs, while not as strong as the orc lord, were powerful enough to overwhelm several hundred-foot soldiers on their own. One of them would be enough to wipe out a large group of lizardmen fighters. Silence. And yet, in less than a second, Rimuru had turned him into minced meat. Literally. In the blink of an eye, there was now a jet-black sword on Rimuru's left hand. The severed fragments of the orc general fell to the ground, creating a pool of blood close to Rimuru's feet. How unsightly. He lifted his right hand up, consuming and then disposing of it through Void God Azathoth. There was a moment in which everyone fell silent. The only thing that could be heard was Benimaru and the others' rampage in the background. The orcs and the orc generals still hadn't caught up with what was going on, but they seemed to understand something. That this guy in front of them was dangerous. Hog. Another orc general rushed at Rimuru, prompting all of the others present to follow suit. They entrapped Rimuru in a circle formation and all 6 generals launched themselves at him at the same time. One of the orc generals brought vertically down a gigantic butcher sword on Rimuru. He moved a step to the side, before using the momentum of his turn to jump and deliver a kick to the orc general's head, effectively severing it from its body. 1 down. Then, he immediately crouched backwards the moment he fell back to the ground, effectively dodging a giant broadsword that was horizontally swung at him. However, before it completely passed over him, he sent an upward kick at it, changing the sword's trajectory to one perfectly perpendicular to the ground. There was so much power behind Rimuru's kick that the orc general's arm snapped and turned loose, branding him unable to control the sword's impulse. The orc general was no pushover, though, and reacted by quickly using his other arm to adjust the sword's trajectory. The moved sword barely grazed by his head and impacted his right shoulder, severing his corresponding arm. It was a necessary sacrifice to prevent a fatal blow, but it was irrelevant in Rimuru's eyes. While the orc general tried to hold on to his conscience due to the immense pain, Rimuru swept his feet and raised him into the air before impaling him with his sword, thrusting it through its wide frame, and even piercing the ground. 2 down. Rimuru temporarily abandoned his sword and moved on to his next target, who was about to charge at him with a gigantic body. He seemed to be a fighter specialized in raw strength, rather than in weapon handling. Raw. He tried to tackle Rimuru, and to his surprise, Rimuru did not move from his spot and instead took him head-on, twisting his body to prevent him from being the first one being hit, and then raised his punch in the air and drove it into the orc's face. That blow was more than enough to completely pulverize the opponent's skull, prompting him to fall on his back, limpless. 3 down. Once done with the third, he lost no time and retrieved his sword in the blink of an eye. Then, he moved on to his next targets, which were 2 of the remaining generals, who were about to attack him in a pincer attack. Without losing a beat, Rimuru rushed forward toward one of them, reaching him in less than a second with overwhelming speed. Without the orc general could even react, Rimuru kneed him in the stomach, and used the power behind the blow to perform a shoulder throw, aiming at the other orc. At the moment of their collision, Rimuru dashed forward, and he pierced both orcs' hearts simultaneously using his sword. The 2 orc generals had a dumbfounded expression as they fell to the ground. 5 down, and now. Rimuru paused for a moment to shake off the blood from his sword with a single swing. Then, he turned his attention to the last orc general, who had retreated a few steps after seeing how his comrades were overwhelmed in mere seconds. That being said, he didn't have the option to retreat. He was fighting in front of his lord, there was no way he would show him unsightly behavior. The last orc general tightened his grip on the weapon on his hand, a battle axe. He raised it high in the air as he made a jump forward, ready to bring it on Rimuru's head. But the attack never reached, or rather, it never had even managed to pass the preparation stage. Just as the orc lord moved, Rimuru took several throwing knives from the imaginary space and threw them at several spots on the orc's huge body. One in the throat, one in the heart, and one between his eyes. All of them were thrown with pinpoint accuracy, while maintaining extremely high speeds. The final orc finally fell, his huge frame and giant battle axe raising a cloud of dust as they touched the ground. 6 down. And just like that, in less than 30 seconds, the strongest fighters of the Orc Lord's army were annihilated by a single individual. It was too one-sided to even call it a fight. It was an execution, nothing more, nothing less. Rimuru began walking toward the Orc Lord, finally ready to begin the actual combat. That was until he sensed something happening in the battlefield. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. And the following is going to be a summary of what happens next, because I am too lazy to actually write the battle, and the people who replied to my profile's comment said they didn't mind me skipping this part. So, yeah, it is all for the sake of the slice of life chapters that are getting delayed because I am too lazy to write this part. Before Rimuru actually fought the Orc Lord, 2 figures arrived at the scene: Gelmid, who was worried after seeing the Orc generals get overwhelmed, and Luminous. The former was killed by the Orc Lord, who consequently evolved into the Orc Disaster. Then, Luminous overwrote the Orc Disaster's name, giving him much more magicules than Gelmid could when he did it. Due to that, the Orc Disaster's power increased by several times what it was on the main timeline. If Rimuru had fought him with his original timeline's strength Predamon Lord, he would have definitely lost. Or rather, he wouldn't have been able to even scratch the Orc Disaster. However, with his current strength, Rimuru was able to completely annihilate him without even breaking a sweat. Luminous, perplexed at the Orc Disaster's overwhelming defeat, escaped from the scene and went back to her castle. Due to the battle, Rimuru gained everyone's respect and the Demon Lord's attention. That's all. And if there is someone who wants to read the actual fight, just comment on this line and I will eventually write it. When I feel like it, I will edit this piece of this chapter and replace it with the actual battle. I will post a comment on my profile when I do update it. Hollow diamond, hollow diamond, hollow diamond. Several dozen meters away from where Rimuru was fighting with the Orc generals, Foltia and Shizu observed the scene with their mouths wide open. They had already overwhelmed the section of the battlefield Benimaru assigned them, so they turned their attention to Rimuru's own battle. Rimuru-san really is amazing. That was the only thing Shizu could say after being shown such prowess. Yufufu, right. My hubby is the best. She got that reply. Yes, your hubby is, Wait, hubby. Shizu-san turned her head to the side in a fluster. Foltia also emerged vaguely from Shizu-san's body and stared at the third Niersan in the scene. See Seal-san. Mine lady. Yufufu. Seal stood beside them both as she smiled, delighted at their reactions. It seems you girls were the quickest to finish, well done. Seal offered them genuine praise. Even though these orcs were small fry, their numbers were nothing to laugh at. Why yes, wait, no. Why are you here, Seal-san? You should be protecting the village. Shizu almost left herself be tricked by the flow of the conversation and Ciel's sweet words, but she managed to keep her focus on what was important. Mine lady praised this unworthy me. It seemed Shizu was the only one who managed to break off Ciel's charm. As Foltia was squirming around in happiness, her thinking capacity seemed to have been reduced to ashes. And why are you dressed like that? Shizu resumed her questions, completely ignoring Foltia. Well, there was an attack in the village, and I had to fight, and when you fight, you have to look cool, right? So I put on my battle armor and then went whoosh, and swoosh, and bong, and crash, and foosh. Just another normal day, right? Quote. Shizu didn't know what to say, so she just kept looking at her. Seal had said she engaged in combat, but her appearance didn't appear the least bit ragged. Since they hadn't left the village that long ago, the battle should have taken place not too long ago, and yet she didn't seem the least bit injured or tired. Kya. Shizu's thought process was interrupted by a fangirl scream coming from the war goddess Seal, who placed her hands on her cheeks and squirmed shyly while blushing. Shizu directed her attention toward the end of Ciel's sight, where she saw Rimuru taking down the orc generals in quick succession. His moves were nearly acrobatic, and it was clearly a show of how his skill was on a completely different level. Both Shizu and Foltia would be able to defeat those same orcs without problems as well, but that was only taking raw power into consideration. From Shizu's experience handling Rimuru, she understood very well that he did not only possess an immense amount of raw power, but that his fighting skill was top-notch. It was not something that Shizu or Foltia could replicate, which is why Rimuru's fighting style, which left everything to his swordplay and technical and martial movements, was AWE inspiring. Kya. He's so cool. Seal would be able to fight on par with Rimuru taking only skill into consideration, but she was too mesmerized with his gallant figure to think about such trivial matters. Suddenly, Ciel's blush intensified, and her movements became stiff and even more shy and reserved. I might need to go change my stoop. Don't say such things out loud. That was how the spectators passed their time.